Welcome to another episode of Relatively Famous, the podcast where I, Chip White, talk to relatives of famous people. My famous relative is Vanna White of Wheel of Fortune. So I think I'll qualify a little bit to do a podcast about relatives of famous people. Today we have Kate Erickson Dumas, the wife of John Lee Dumas. And if you're not a podcast fan, John and Kate are giants in the world with eonfire, Entrepreneur on Fire. John was one of the first to do a daily podcast with entrepreneurs, and he does also MicroStrategy Today. But today we're going to find out about his wife and his partner in business, Kate Dumas. And I also want to let you know, if you're looking for the perfect vacation for family, golf, or just a great place to go to the beach, visit myrtlebeach.com to plan your vacation. Myrtle Beach also is a very family-friendly, sensitive children with sensory sensitivity and autism. They want you to know that the beach is for everybody, and learn more about that at visitmyrtlebeach.com. So today, let's welcome Kate Erickson Dumas.
Relatively Famous Podcast with Chip White.
Kate, welcome to Relatively Famous. And, really, you're famous in your own right, but, I had to connect you to John because that's what the show's about.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat today.
So we met briefly at Podfest down in Orlando recently. And, your husband and you gave an amazing keynote with the keynote speakers. I learned a lot from John. Crazy thing is, I actually have this podcast because I did a Dean Grazioso, I can never say his name, Tony Robbins thing called Launchpad, and John was a guest. And I recognized him when he was there. I went, hey, wait, you're the guy from Launchpad. And because of that kind of motivation from those guys, we did the podcast. So I owe this all to you guys.
That's very cool. I love to hear that. I remember when they invited John to do a session on podcasting, and I thought, oh, this is so awesome because they have such a wide reach and a great audience. So I thought it was such a perfect fit. I'm really glad to hear that.
So quickly, where are you from originally?
I am originally from San Diego, California, and my family still lives my parents still live in the house that I grew up in. So always great to go back and visit.
Okay, so the house you grew up in, I can describe the feeling when you go back home and walk into that house that you grew up in.
Oh gosh, just love. I just feel like so much love. I feel so comfortable at home. It sounds funny to say, but I guess that's the feeling.
Yeah, I think we all kind of want to go home, and sometimes it's always a little different. What kind of brought you and John together?
So John's from Maine originally, and so we really honestly couldn't be further apart. One side of the coast on the south to the other side of the coast on the north. And we met by happenstance when I was looking for a studio apartment in Pacific Beach, San Diego. And I looked at about 8 different units. I didn't really love any of them, and I had one more that I was going to check out. John had moved to San Diego maybe about 6 months prior, totally on a whim. He was actually living in New York City at the time and decided that he would love a little more beach vibes and great weather, speaking of weather. And so he chose San Diego. He moved into a studio apartment in Pacific Beach, and he chose this specific apartment because it was the only one that he could find that wasn't nailing him down for like an entire year. He had never been out there, so he wanted a month-to-month lease so that if he, decided that he didn't like it for whatever reason, that it would be easy for him to kind of jump ship and find another place. And it just turns out that the last apartment that I looked at was a unit next door to John. And so we met as next door neighbors. We became great friends and started hanging out He actually had a girlfriend at the time, but we would spend, weekends together going out. We had the same kind of like melded friend groups, and built a great friendship over a year's time.
That's best way to start a relationship. Now I do bounce around a little bit, so forgive me because I don't have a lot of notes here. Don't have any notes here actually.
No problem.
Family, San Diego, because as I asked that other question, I started thinking back. Your family's still there. Talking about growing up a little bit in San Diego, do you have brothers, sisters? Again, I know nothing about you, so I love, we're like at a party having a conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, growing up in San Diego was such a dream. And I mean, who knows if you have realized it at the time, right? You're a little kid, but we would spend after schools down at the beach boogie boarding. My parents lived in a house that was just a block and a half from the beach. Is a house that we rented when we first moved out there. We actually moved from Santa Fe, New Mexico, but I was like 5 years old at the time. So I consider San Diego home and where I grew up because it's really what I remember. And I just remember those afternoons at the beach. My parents would come down and we'd sit there for hours. And the beaches in San Diego are really beautiful. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Pacific Beach, but just some really epic waves and beautiful weather year round. So we were very lucky for that. My family was also really into taking like weekend camping trips, and my grandparents lived out in Arizona, my dad's parents, and then my other grandparents, my mom's parents, lived in Minnesota. So we would sometimes spend summers in Minnesota. So we traveled a lot, but we really maximized our time in San Diego. And I'm so grateful for that. Looking back and, hearing from a lot of people who have not spent a lot of time at the beach, if any at all, and, maybe went through winters. What I loved most about San Diego is that, we were on the beach, a couple hours drive, you could be in the desert, a couple hours more drive, you're in the mountains with snow. So it was really this environment that gave us the best of everything at our fingertips with short drives. And so, yeah, we really got out and explored. We were a very active family. I have one sister. She's older than I am, 2.5 years older. I have a beautiful niece and nephew who my niece is 12 and my nephew is 10. So super fun ages right now. And very close with them. They actually still live out in San Diego as well. They're maybe a couple miles from my parents. So going home is a lot of fun because not only am I home, but I'm with all my family. I have a pretty small family. My dad was an only child, and both sets of my grandparents have passed. So we have a very tight-knit family, and a relatively small family, like I said. But yeah, that's kind of a little glimpse into growing up.
That's right. So crazy. I grew up at the beach, but on the other coast in North Myrtle Beach,
Okay.
South Carolina. And, like you, after school, you go to the beach. I was a surfer. My parents, I remember as kids, my parents taking us. We had lifeguards back in my day, way before you were born, would have these canvas and rubber floats that they would rent. And the idea was you would thump them to find the one with the most air in it, and it would ride a wave literally to the water was like this deep, like an inch deep, And at the end of the day, your chest was raw from the canvas. And that's a memory from me as a kid that really sticks out about going to the beach. Is there something from any part of the beach? I know you talked about boogie boarding. Is there something from going to the beach in San Diego as a child that really resonates as a memory, like a smell? Like I can smell a canvas floating. Oh my God, that's my childhood. Is there something like that for you?
Yeah, my grandparents would come out and visit us multiple times a year, and they would always stay at this little kind of beach inn. It was right on the ocean there where we'd spend all of our time. It was at the Tower 19 was the number of the tower. And my grandma and I would go collect shells. And that's such a special memory for me, not only for the time that we got to spend together, but I still have this glass jar with a little cover on it. It's downstairs in our living room area. I get to look at it every day, and it's full of the shells that we collected together on the beach. So that's definitely a standout for me. That just like how simple that is. And something that I get to, think about and appreciate every day.
Now you're a new mom. I think
Yeah.
Bo's a year now, 14 months.
Yep, you got it.
What kind of memories do you hope to build with him? Like, I love taking my son back home. We were close, and we would go to the beach. And I love having those memories of taking him out on the surfboard or building a sandcastle. What kind of memories do you hope to build with Bo that kind of reflect or mimic your childhood?
I mean, I definitely think that time at the beach, we live in Puerto Rico. We're just right down the street from some beautiful beaches here. So I think definitely spending time in the ocean. He seems to love water. So we go swimming almost every day. We're really, really lucky to have a pool here at the house. So, those kinds of memories, I think, will be really special ones. We live in a very small, it's actually not too small, but it's a gated community. We have a really beautiful community of friends here. I started a moms group where I wanted to get together with all the moms who had babies born in 2023. And the only reason that I wanted to kind of keep it to like those parameters was I really wanted to build some deep relationships with other moms. And I also wanted Bo to be around the kids that he's, I'm assuming that he's going to be growing up with. And it turns out that group ended up being 14 moms and babies, which is pretty incredible if you think about like a small area in Puerto Rico, that there's 14 moms with babies born in 2023. So I also have tried to be really intentional about getting together with those moms and having Bo around those babies. Actually, just this morning, I came back for this chat with you. We were at the park. One of the moms brought like an artist easel, and we had some other activities down at the playground. So it's really awesome, a great feeling for me to know that he's going to grow up around really close friends and people that he's known for a really long time. I think that's important because when I think back to my time in my childhood, some of my best friends today still are kids that I met in school and that I met just around my neighborhood. So I hope to create that for Bo as well.
That's funny because you just answered my kind of next question, because I'm still friends with guys I met in the 6th grade, people that I literally grew up with, and even though we live in different parts of the world. My son's really good friends with a group of his high school buddies that, they call themselves the Greasy Boys. I don't know why, but they did. There's like 8 of them. They still stay in contact, and I think that's really important. And I love the fact you said you stay in touch with some of your childhood friends. I think that's amazing. So now,
yeah, I feel very lucky for that.
You guys were in San Diego. John went back to Maine. I'm switching around. We're going to go back to you and John and your relationship. And you went to Maine? Run me through that, because that's a huge difference. I went from LA to Boston, and that was a culture shock a little bit. So I'm not, and we drove up to Maine. I know that's got to be a culture shock.
You honestly took the words right out of my mouth. It was a culture shock for me. And I feel silly saying that, but I had never, like I said, we lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico. When I was 5 years old, we moved to San Diego, and I literally spent my entire life in San Diego. I went to school in San Francisco for 2 years, then ended up transferring back down to San Diego. I did my graduate degree in Long Beach. So I had literally never spent time outside of California from the age of 5 up, other than just visiting places. I'd never even been to the East Coast. And like I said, John and I had become really close friends, being neighbors. And he kind of made this very big announcement that he was going to be going back to Maine, his hometown. He had accepted a commercial real estate position there, and he was going to, try and get on a partnership track. Like that was going to be, he felt that since he had turned 30, that maybe it was time for him to kind of figure out what he was going to do with his life. And his sister had just had her first child. And like my family, who's all still in San Diego, his family's all still in Maine. And so he kind of felt a draw to go back there. So he had made this big announcement to all of his friends that he was going to be moving back to Maine, and he was having this big goodbye party. And, up until that point, I had always just looked at John as a great friend. I had talked to him about like different job positions that I was in. And, I really leaned on him for like life advice. I felt like I trusted him. And again, we had built this great relationship. But when he said that he was leaving, I thought like, oh man, I like this guy. Like, I don't want him to leave. I was really sad about it. And it kind of like punched me in the gut. Like, no, you can't leave. Like, we're just getting started here. He had ended his relationship that he was in a couple months prior to that. And pretty much when he made that announcement, we started spending time together in a very different way. And it was a 2-week period from when he announced that he was leaving to when he left. And for those 2 weeks, we literally spent every day together. And when he moved to Maine, it was kind of like, this has been really incredible. We hadn't really defined like that we were boyfriend and girlfriend, or no talk of like long distance relationship or anything like that. We just said like, all right, this has been amazing. I asked him to stay. He said he wasn't going to. And so he left. And I said, well, if you feel like giving me a call sometime, like I'll look forward to that call. And he called me a couple days later. And I think we must have talked for like 3 hours or something. Back in the day when phone calls were like a cool thing. And on that call, we made plans to meet up in Chicago. And I think within a month, like we met up in Chicago and spent a long weekend together. Then we met up in St. Louis and spent a long weekend together a couple months later, maybe even like a month later. And then a month after that, he invited me to Maine to come meet his family and to kind of check it out. He knew that he was trying to get me to check it out for me to move there. I thought I was just going out to visit him. And my last night in Maine, he said, will you move out here? And that was like, for me, again, having never left California, knowing nothing about the East Coast other than these couple of days that I had just spent in Maine, I thought like, wow, this is a really big move for me, somebody who stayed pretty comfortable most of my life. But I did it. I quit my job. I sold all of my stuff. I said goodbye to my family, which was incredibly difficult. And I moved to Maine November 1st of all times of the year. And we ended up living in Maine for almost a couple of years and really had a fantastic time out there. I mean, I grew to love Maine like I didn't think I'd be able to after the first couple months I spent there.
Yeah, it's a beautiful state. And so I know this part because I heard the keynote speak. So you moved to Maine. John makes this big announcement that changes eventually, not right off the bat, but pretty quickly, it changes your guys' life. And eventually you realize that you guys are going to have to partner in this. And for those of you that don't know, eonfire is a huge podcast. I mean, he's done over 4,500 episodes. There's over 100 million viewers. If you're an entrepreneur, you probably listen to it. Walk me through that announcement. And we all know you're the key to the success of eonfire. talk to us a little bit about eonfire and your business relationship and we'll tag on that with, I want to hear more about your new podcast also.
Yeah, definitely. So I was working in marketing and advertising. And one day, I'm sitting on my lunch break, I get an email from John, and it's like this long, like novel of an email. And I thought, oh my gosh, what's he emailing me about? Like, I'm going to see him in a couple hours when we get home. And I could tell that he had put a lot of time and thought into whatever he was going to tell me. And he told me that he had been doing a lot of research and that he really thought that this podcasting thing was big. And he wanted to quit his job in commercial real estate to launch a podcast. And I thought, like, wow. I mean, I listened to podcasts, but I'd never considered it as something that you would do for a business, for a career. And, I got home that night. He's like, I just wanted to send this to you so that you could read it and kind of get the gist of it. I want to talk about it tonight over dinner. So we did. And by the end of the conversation, John just has a way with, like, you can tell exactly how he feels about something. He's not hiding anything. He's very much like, what you see is what you get. And him talking about his idea to launch this podcast and his vision for what this could be, I thought, like, how could I not support this? He was so confident about it. And even though he was incredibly nervous and scared and didn't know if it was going to work or not, like, he knew that this was something that he had to do. So I fully supported him in doing that. He ended up leaving his job in commercial real estate, launched this podcast, and within about 6 months had really gained a lot of traction and momentum. His listeners were doubling and tripling like every day after the first couple of months. And he had people reaching out to him asking if they could pay him money to come on a podcast and talk about a book that they were launching or a product that they had. And I think that he quickly realized, like, wow, I have a lot more opportunity here than I even ever imagined. I want to start creating products and services to give to this audience. I mean, he had people reaching out and asking for all these things. Do you do coaching? Do you offer mentorship? Do you have a mastermind that I can join? And he thought, well, I don't have any of those things, but I'd love to create them. And so he came to me and said, I would love for you to join me in this and help me build all these things that people are asking for. I can't do this alone. Will you quit your job and join the team? And spoiler alert, I did do that. And that was I quit my job and joined the team in April of 2013. So we've been working together for quite a while.
That's pretty amazing, because a lot of couples have a tough time working. I have to admit that sometimes I think my wife and I struggle just trying to redo a house, as well run a business.
I get it.
So you quit. You guys have taken it to a whole new level, and I want to talk about what you do to make that, because we know John's the face. John's phenomenal, man, and he was so nice to me at Podfest. I mean, I'm new at this. I'm a little dude. I'm not trying to sell product. I'm not trying to convince or I just want to have interviews with some friends. But he was so nice, and you were too. But you were busy with Bo a lot. But you were always very friendly when we chatted. Talk about how you really dove into the business part, and made you guys successful, and how you are now branching out more, because Kate is her own lady, her own woman. She's not just John's wife. So let's kind of run a little bit through that, if it's okay with you.
Yeah, definitely. So, we quickly realized that John and I have very different skill sets, which serves us very well. I think from the very beginning, we were right to understand that the way that this was going to work is if we could each work in our own lanes and not get in each other's lane. Because we're good at different things, he's good at what I'm not, and vice versa. It's really easy to stay in our own lane. And for, as long as I can remember, I really don't remember a time when it wasn't like this. It just kind of like started to fall into place. John would come up with this incredible idea, and I'd figure out how to make it work. And I'd go find out what software we needed, and I would put together a marketing funnel for it. And John would, keep creating the podcast and talk about all of this stuff, and people would join the funnels, and the funnels would work. And our products and services, we don't take lightly. So, we really give all to the things that we're offering and asking people to pay us money for. So we kind of started creating like this well-oiled machine where it was like, if we can do this one time, we can do it 7 times. Like, what else do people want? And so it started with a mastermind, and we had 100 people in that mastermind for several years. We've also done smaller masterminds. There are 10 people or less that are very high touch. We've done live events. We always have kept our live events. They're more like in-person masterminds really than live events, because our first one was 6 people. Our second one was 8 people. And then actually, speaking of Dean Graciosi and Tony Robbins, when we did affiliate launch with them for one of their products, we invited our VIP affiliates who joined through our link. We put on a live event here in Puerto Rico, and we had 30 people at that. We've also created online courses. We have a podcasting course that teaches people how to create, grow, and monetize their podcasts. At one time, we had a course on how to create a webinar that converts, when webinars were, a lot more integral to creating and selling products and getting those out there. We did a really hard push in the webinar space for a while. So we kind of just zeroed in on a process that worked. We iterated on it to make it the best that it possibly could be. And then we kept doing it over and over for what our audience was asking for. We've created 3 journals, the Freedom Journal, which is goal focused, the Mastery Journal, which focuses on productivity, discipline, and focus, and the Podcast Journal, which helps you go from idea to launch in 50 days. John has traditionally published a book with HarperCollins called The Common Path to Uncommon Success. And I'd say over, that time, we just, probably the biggest thing is, and the toughest thing was navigating what we want this to look like for us, because we were at a place where it would have been very easy to continue building and growing our team and creating more products and more services. Thankfully, we checked in with ourselves and realized that that wasn't actually the business that we wanted. That wasn't the lifestyle that we wanted. And so we were very lucky to kind of hit these pivot points where we could have kept going and getting bigger and building more and having more team. But we decided not to. We decided to continue pouring ourselves into what we had already created. We run a very lean team. We talked about it at Podfest, we do a monthly income report. So if you're familiar with those, or if you check those out, you'll see that we have a very lean operation. We don't spend unnecessary money. We're not big into like advertising. We've really leveraged the podcast and the audience that we've grown there that's our biggest marketing arm and channel by far. So that's kind of the progression in a nutshell.
Well, I love the fact that you guys, you know what you want to do. And I hate to use the word, you're not being greedy. You make a very comfortable living. Like you said, the numbers, you're very open with your numbers, and it's pretty amazing, but you're not trying to be the $100 million, the 40, the 400 million, the billionaire. You love that you want to live the life that you want comfortably. And I admire that, and the fact that that's what you're doing. So all that you're doing, how did you find time to do? Is it Kate's Advice? What's your podcast?
Kate's Take. Close.
Kate's Take. That's it. Yes.
Yeah. So I launched Kate's Take back in 2014, and that was really, we kept getting a lot of questions about like, well, how are you guys doing all of this? And, it didn't seem appropriate for the Entrepreneurs on Fire podcast, given that John does interviews. And that was really more about focusing on our guests versus focusing on our business. But I thought, well, that would be kind of cool. Maybe it would be good for me to kind of step out of my fear of being anywhere near the spotlight. And a podcast's a great way to do that, right? Because you're still kind of behind the mic. You don't have to be on video if you don't want to be. So for me at that time in my journey, that was probably like the scariest thing I ever possibly could have done. And so I knew that that's exactly what I needed to do. And I launched that podcast to give people a behind the scenes look at running a 7-figure business. Like that was kind of the idea behind Kate's Take. Let me share with you how we create our systems, how we launch our products, how we put together marketing campaigns, what software we're using. So I kind of got into the nitty gritty behind the scenes stuff that not a ton of entrepreneurs talk about, because typically entrepreneurs aren't doing that part of the business. They have an integrator or, a CMO or a CFO or COO or all these other people that are helping them with that behind the scenes stuff. So being able to share that helped me grow exponentially, because again, it was something I was very uncomfortable with in the beginning. And, I was doing that podcast very consistently in the beginning. I think I started out 3 days a week. I might have at one point moved to once a week when we were just like really busy in our business, and I didn't have the same time to commit to it that I did when I first launched. And then I actually moved into creating seasons on the podcast, which is really great for me because I could kind of go hard push, full throttle for like 12 weeks. And then I would take like 4 weeks off and kind of be able to focus on other things in our business. And since having our son, I knew that that was probably going to have to iterate again. And so I have not published an episode on the podcast since having my son. I've been very fully invested in my day-to-day with him, which has been really awesome. And I'm loving that. But we'll see where it goes in the next couple of months as he's getting older. You know, I mentioned the friends group that we have and that we get to hang out with other kids and other moms a lot, but I'd also love for him to, you know, have the interaction that you get from some type of like preschool or something to that effect. So we'll see what happens with that.
Well, that you kind of answered my next question. Anyways, I was going to ask about what's it like now. You've been so successful and so focused on your guys' life and career. Now you're not just John's wife, but you're Bo's mom. So what? And you said just quickly, because I know we're running out of time. How has Bo changed your life?
Oh man, you know, I think this is probably pretty similar to the way that I put it at Podfest. It makes everything so much fuller. And I'm not trying to sugarcoat anything. When I say fuller, it's also sometimes the frustration and the stress levels are fuller, but the love is fuller and the laughable moments are fuller. I mean, he cracks me up. So sometimes he does the craziest, silliest things. And I'm just like, what is going on in his head right now? So I didn't know how I was going to feel. Did I freeze up?
Froze up a little bit. That's okay. We can still hear you.
Am I okay?
You're good. Yes, you're good.
Okay. Sorry. I didn't know how I was going to feel about the transition from being a full-time entrepreneur and so focused in this business and doing what I'd been doing for, 10 years straight to becoming a mom. I didn't know if I was going to miss business. I didn't know if I was going to want to hire a nanny so that I could like be back in the mix, or I didn't know if I was going to love spending time with Bo and like want to be with him all the time. Turns out I absolutely love spending time with Bo. I'm still working in the business. I'm still doing a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Still manage our sponsorships and our content and our communities, and do a lot of work with our team. But I'm so incredibly grateful that our business is at a place where I can make this choice to focus on him more. And, I still feel like 14 months in, I'm very much continuing to figure out what being a mom, what this position looks like. Because sometimes it changes day to day. Sometimes I do want to be working on the business. Sometimes I do want to be thinking about new ideas and new projects. And other times I'm so happy to just be out for the day with him and not be thinking about business at all. So I feel like it's very ever evolving. I mean, my life has changed in every possible way with him coming into this world, which everybody tells you. And I think that, hopefully that when you decide to become a parent. But until you experience it, it's really like you can't describe that to someone, But I'm really loving it. John and I are really enjoying parenthood. And it's just like, it's such a special experience. And I'm so glad that we've waited this long. We very intentionally waited until later in our life to start a family because we love travel. We've been fully invested in this business for, 12 years. And I think both of us really felt ready for this because we've had so many awesome experiences and checked so many blocks in our life. And now getting to experience being parents is, priceless.
Yeah. And you know what? It's a stupid cliche, but I'm going to share it. Enjoy it because it goes so fast. Blink of an eye. I had brown hair and a toddler. Now I've got silver hair and a 25-year-old. So
Yeah.
I want to thank so much for your time. And my last question that I always ask everyone is, what did I not ask you, or what did you not share that you really wanted me to ask, or you really wanted to get out there?
Gosh, I was just really excited about having this conversation with you today. I had zero expectations. That's a great question. I really feel like I put it all out on the table, and I'm a very open book, so I didn't hold anything back.
You did, and that was awesome. And I appreciate we actually went a little longer than most episodes, and I'm super grateful for that because it's super interesting. And I look forward to our paths crossing again at some other Podfest or Pod something, who knows, or down in Puerto Rico. We got some friends down there. Maybe come down and visit. But again,
very nice.
Super. Thank you for your time. Give John a high five for me. Give Bo a hug, and we'll chat again soon. Will do. Thank you so much. Thanks. Thanks, Kate, for being my guest today. You can learn more about Kate and John at Entrepreneur on Fire, also at the MicroStrategy Today for about Bitcoin. John's phenomenal in the entrepreneur world. Kate's just a super special lady. I want to thank Nelco Media and Nelco Comics for being our hosts and our producers. If you want to know more about traveling with an autistic child or an autistic adult or a sensory sensitive kid, and you're not sure where to go on vacation, visit myrtlebeach.com can give you some information on that. Myrtle Beach strives in being a beach for everybody. So go to visitmyrtlebeach.com, learn more about it. It's a great family vacation. There's mini golf, there's the beach, there's just so much, restaurants galore. There's just so much, and many cater towards autism and sensory sensitive kids. That's visitmyrtlebeach.com. And if you happen to know someone famous or a relative of someone famous who'd make a great guest, reach out to me at podcastrelativelyfamous@gmail.com. That's podcastrelativelyfamous@gmail.com. Love to have guests. I'm always looking for guests. Thank you for joining us this episode.
You've been listening to Relatively Famous with Chip White. Please like and subscribe to Relatively Famous with Chip White.